I am Monica Grable, Arts Education Director here at the Montana Arts Council, and I have the privilege of leading us through um, today's session, but also this project that is new to us and new to all of you. So, um, May, are you able to keep an eye on the entries for me? Great. Thanks so much. Again, welcome. I'm just going to give a quick overview and then um, we'll enter into some conversation and get into some of the nitty gritty. The first thing I would like to say about this project is that it is a 2-year opportunity for our agency to advance creative aging work from around the state. And can I just see a show of hands to see how many of you are already aware of creative aging as a field of work? One, two, maybe three of you. Okay, great. For the two or three of you, sorry that this is duplicative, but I should then give some information or background on where this term comes from. This has been an emerging field of work for about 15 to 20 years approximately. And so long, in fact, now that we really don't say emerging so much anymore. It's a known field of work. State agencies, state arts agencies like ours across the country have been involved in many, many projects. Our first foray into this work began in 21. I think we had just um, entered our application for our first ever grant for this work right as the pandemic was starting. Super convenient. But it did give us a lot of practice on Zoom right from the get-go. And that was more of an exploratory year. And since then, we've been privileged to be a part of numerous projects, primarily centered on rural states in the West. And those have been led by Lifetime Arts. Lifetimearts.org is their website if you'd like to check it out. And they are a national leader in this work, really responsible for nationwide advancement. And the essence of creative aging work is really that older adults deserve arts learning too, not a quick one-off paint your plate, kind of session. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but real robust arts learning that is scaffolded in the same way that we might approach arts education for younger learners, in K-12 schools and so on. And a part of that is that older adults obviously have the capacity for learning, they have the desire for learning, the time to not only gain, maybe a workshop in a particular art medium or discipline, but it may actually become something that they have for their own creative daily practice, which is a great part about it. But really, the emphasis is on that robust learning, the acquisition of skills in a medium, and with some creative aging programs. And by the way, that term is used to describe the field. The workshops themselves often are not labeled as creative aging. They're just maybe getting the message out there through time of day or setting, that this is a chance for adults, say over 60, to um, gather with their peers and share some learning, build community, and have a creative experience. So the creative aging terminology is definitely used by the field, but not necessarily tagged on to every um, workshop title. So that's the essence of what we're trying to create here. But you can imagine that there are some parallel goals besides the arts learning. We are dealing with an epidemic of loneliness in this country. Um, this is not news to any of us on this call, I'm sure. And that, idea that the arts are a problem solver is especially true in this case because what better experience can you imagine than sharing arts and learning, having a community of your peers, if you're in that age group. And, oftentimes these programs do involve other age groups as well, but the intent really is that very few programs like this exist. And so, therefore, we want to make those opportunities readily available. As I mentioned, participants in this age group certainly might find themselves with some time on their hands. And in our state, in Montana, we know we have so many retirees, many of whom have come to Montana as their chosen retiree spot. And they are active and they are doing all the things and they're hiking and snowboarding and all of that, and they're finally able to take in some learning that maybe they've always wanted to do. So that's the groundwork. There are many, many resources available. Again, Lifetime Arts has a website full of resources and also learning opportunities. And I should mention that we do, if you received this um, invite, you probably also saw that there is a series of workshops mostly aimed at teaching artists, but we welcome, administrators, program administrators, other interested folks to take part. And we even have a few extra spots for maybe somebody who's just wanting to be an observer and not necessarily an active participant in those workshops. So just be in touch with me. I think we have another couple teaching spots left, and then 4 or 5 more for program administrators. So um, just keep that in mind. Those start at the end of the month and they do come up periodically. What's special about that teaching artist opportunity is that it is a part of the grant that we're currently involved in, Creative Aging in the West, with our fellow Western states. And therefore, it is free of charge. And typically, Lifetime Arts would charge about $300, I believe it is, maybe $295 for that 6-hour training. So if either you or someone you know is interested, I'll see if I can get them in. So if you joined late and didn't hear me say this, please add your name and where you are calling in from in the chat. So my goals for this session are to share our vision for this project that we're calling Artful Life, and a little bit of background on how it came to be. We're going to discuss the process, meaning like how to apply and become involved in the project potentially, and also the possibilities for the project, because one of the primary intents of this particular project is to center the work in communities around the state in ways that are specific to that community, meaning that they are addressing a need and maybe even some stylistic elements that would be important in that particular community. So community based. And then the third goal for the session, as I mentioned at the top, is that I want to answer any questions you come up with. I'm hoping we can be pretty informal and conversational um, during that session. And of course, it goes without saying, I hope that I'm always a resource. If you think of a question later and that didn't get covered, I hope that you will reach out to me. I am going to put right now, before I forget, my email and phone number in the chat, just in case. you don't already have that at the ready. And again, feel free to be in touch. This project, Artful Life, has come about because the Montana Arts Council was awarded a significant grant this winter from the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, which is the professional organization for every state agency across the country. They support us in our work, and this is one of the ways they've chosen to support us is by making this grant available. So I think about half of the states, maybe 27 this go around, are participating in a project of their own design in their state. Ours is about creating teams, as I said, that are community based and trying to extend the work across the state through really creating partnerships um, and shared work that is, cross across fields. Um, not only involving arts folks, but others interested in this work. Um, so this project then is actually a 2-year project. It's kind of a slow rolling project, which I think is fantastic because there are times, let's say during the pandemic, where we were handed some funds from the national level and had to hurry up and distribute, and everything felt like a rush in, with good reason, trying to get support to our arts organizations. In this case, we have the luxury of time, and therefore we wanted to create a project that would first identify teams that are community based, um, made up of uh, 3 to 4 individuals per team. And that team is going to be comprised of one arts administrator, one professional working with older adults. In other words, that's their area of expertise. And then another 1 to 2 individuals who are um, either an education curator, a director of arts education with a local entity or nonprofit, or a teaching artist, or preferably one of both. So practitioners of arts education will make up half the team. The other half are administrators specializing in arts and or working with older adults. So 6 to 8 teams will ultimately be chosen to take part in the project. And I think the easiest thing for me to do right now would be to show you the schedule. So I'm gonna share my screen for a moment. So May 1st is the deadline for the application submission. And really, this application is a letter of inquiry. The letter of inquiry process basically allows teams to say, yes, we're interested. Yes, we're thinking about this. Here's where we are in our work involving creative aging. And by the way, you do not already have to have a large basis of knowledge um, in the field in order to apply, but it does help us gauge where everyone is. Um, Following that, and I apologize, this part isn't on the schedule, but after that initial application, what's going to happen is that we will reach out and interview each team via Zoom as a sort of part 2 of the application process. Um, then by mid-June, those identified and selected to participate will be notified, and at that time, we will share a final, more detailed schedule of what's going to happen in the fall. And and also an agreement at that point that spells out responsibilities for the chosen teams. And then beginning in mid-September through up until just before Thanksgiving, we will hold four learning sessions for the cohort. So this is both a chance to take in new knowledge and also um, share, do some sharing with your peer organizations and kind of workshop your ideas for a set of a series of programs in creative aging that you would then enact in your community. So we'll have those four sessions. And by the way, there is a fifth session that's going to take place that is going to be available to the teams, optional, but also available to everyone else. And that is centered on intergenerational learning in a creative aging space. So keep your eye open for that, whether or not you are involved in this project as a selected team, that will be open to everyone. So of interest to all of you. Um, and then in December of this year, the teams that have gone through those learning sessions and workshopping their ideas, essentially what we're doing during part of those learning sessions is walking you through really what is an application process in our system, where you will do all the deep planning to construct a series of creative aging offerings for your community that could be cross-disciplinary, meaning that you might have a visual art offering, something in theater. We have a great improv class going right now in Bozeman, for instance, or dance. It might be a music class. So having that variety of offerings will help teach your community what is possible in creative aging work. And the amount of money that will be awarded to each cohort um, team chosen is up to $10,000. And the reason that we say that is because we won't know until we get to the selection process if we're going to have six teams or eight. Um, the next thing that will happen in January is that a contract will become available so that we can then pay out those grant funds to the team. And while I'm mentioning that, I should say that it will be necessary for um, those grant funds to be paid to um, an organization willing to sort of take the responsibility for the money. So that's something to think about as you develop your team. In other words, it's not going to be split up among team members in any way. It's just going to go to the one leader for the team. Um, so the plans for review, again, just to back up a second, are really in the form of a grant application in our system because that's the easiest way for us to do it. But by the time we get to that point, you'll have done a lot of the parts and pieces during those four learning sessions, where we're kind of workshopping and thinking through all the details of the program planning. Um, and by mid-January, then grants will be in process of being paid out, depending on where that group is in terms of their paperwork and all of that. And then programs will take place. The series of 3 to 5 workshops that you would design as a team in your community would take place anywhere from February of 27 through late fall of 27. And then we are also leaving space because sometimes because of weather or something, programs might need to extend into early 28. That's sort of the backup plan. And so, really the intent is to at least design the programs so that they would happen in, early spring or late winter, sorry, of 27 through late fall of 27 initially, and then the backup plan of extending into 28 as needed. Reporting will be due mid-March, and that's part of what we'll talk about during those learning sessions as well, how to do the advanced work so that the reporting is very, very easy. And those are things like tracking participation numbers, documenting with photos, surveys for participants, that kind of thing. So the reporting isn't so heavy duty in and of itself if you've done those steps. So that's why we will make that a part of the learning process. Um, and then in April, we'll be asking each team to prepare a presentation, basically a slideshow, PowerPoint or something, that then can be shared with your fellow cohort members, the other teams, when we get together in person. And that date will be identified on what works best for the selected teams. But that will take place in um, in April or May, probably the latter part of April, early part of May in 2028, which is such a funny thing to think about. It's again such a rare opportunity for us to be able to just take our time and spread this out over a couple of years and really give our participants a chance to design programs that are the very best for their community and to do that while supporting you along the way. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, but those same project timeline pieces are in the application. So there's an overview section in the application that gives you a little bit of background information and then also this timeline. So far, what questions do you have about the timeline of things, the structure of a team that will apply? Um, Feel free to unmute yourself and just start talking, or if you want, you can use the raise hand symbol too. I can't
So
believe it.
basically,
No, cool. Oh, yeah.
it's going to be people that are part of an organization already. Is that right?
Um, I think it would be best if at least one person um, was representing an organization, and that just has to do with the logistics of it all. Um, in many of our communities, though, there is not an arts organization per se. So our intent is to help you develop a team that will work for the project. It just tends to be the case that an organization often is set up better to accept funds, distribute that out to teaching artists they might be working with and the like, but I think it's going to be a little bit on a case by case basis. Um, so, um, yeah, uh, I, I don't know if that's enough of an answer for right now, but if you have a follow-up, just go ahead and ask.
No, I kind of thought that's what you meant.
Mm. Yeah,
There's a couple of organizations, nonprofits here in Butte that
yeah,
are pretty much art oriented.
hmm
I don't see anybody else here from Butte, so I'm
yeah,
guessing that they either didn't get the memo or weren't
yeah,
interested or
yeah,
whatever. So I didn't
yeah,
know. I do know some people pretty well in one of them,
yeah,
and I just didn't know if I should pass it on or something like that
sure.
because I don't want to be an administrator, but I would. I have
Right,
led. I've led teams
sure.
as a lead
Great,
artist, not as an administrator.
great. Oh,
So
that's fantastic. Yes, I again, I think it's going to be a little bit on a case by case basis, but as the staff member of the Montana Arts Council, I have a lot of connections within the communities where an arts organization exists. And then I think, another administrator might be from an area agencies on aging or a similar entity like that. So what we would like, though, is for two members of the team to be identified before you apply. So so it might be that we just get on a phone call and talk through some options. Our intent is to work with you prior to you applying to identify team members. But even if let's say the teaching artist wasn't identified yet and other two members were, we would go ahead and accept the application round one and then sort of address that during the interview process, if that's what it takes to get you to a full team. So it's a little bit of a multi-step process, more than we normally do for a traditional grant. But um, that as a starting spot, we want to at least make sure that there are two people teaming together before an application is entered. Hope
Okay.
that makes sense. Yeah,
Yes, it
yeah,
does.
yeah. Good. So we're here to support you, and I am gonna I don't- you're all pretty much at a traditional computer, it might seem, but if you're on your phone, you might want to do this later. But I'm going to share first the link to our grants management system where this application lives, knowing full well, I have to say, that some of you, many of you probably are not connected to our grants management system yet. I'll just say that there are two ways that you can have an account in our system. Individuals can have an account, but there are very limited ways that we can award um, funds to individuals. Really, one way called our strategic investment grants. So, all the other grants awarded through the Montana Arts Council go to nonprofit organizations. Um, but that can mean a community or fiscal, or excuse me, municipal entity. It could be a school, it could be a senior citizen center, it could be a library. So many different types of nonprofit entities live in our system. And then the representative from that system could share working on the application by using the collaborate button that exists within the form. So this is another case of I would have to walk you through maybe setting up an account if you're with an organization and you don't have one, and if you're not with an organization, we would just wait until the team was formed, make sure that one member of the team was connected to an eligible organization, and sort of take it from there and share out the form. So I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but it will once you get your eyes on it, I think. The form itself, I'm going to show you in a minute, and it is very simple. Basically, we are wanting to know, um, you know, the who. So the makeup of your team, one of those team members are going to be identified as the leader. We want to know what you already know in terms of the field of creative aging work so that we can design sessions that are appropriate. And then the why is part three. Why are you interested in providing access to arts learning opportunities in your community that are expressly designed to meet the needs of the community that you're living in. So, see if I can do a little better this time on the screen sharing. Um, I have two screens that I work from, and I'm always shocked at myself how often I'm mixing up the screens when I'm in a meeting like this. But hopefully, are you seeing the overview on your screen right now? Great. So this is the application itself in our system. It's called Artful Life 2026. And by the way, when you have an account in our grants management system, um, anything that is open process-wise, meaning a grant opportunity or an opportunity like this that is available for applications, should appear on your desktop, we call it, on your dashboard. Um, but if not, you can always hit the apply button at the top and then those opportunities will appear. So for those of you who already have an account, this is what you want to look for. Artful Life 2026. This gives a little bit of background and then the timeline that I just showed you. That's its own drop-down section. In the second section, it's just this project information, and I'm just going to show you how super simple we made this. Um, Project name, the name of the project lead. Again, that should be somebody tied to the applying entity. Uh, and this is where you can put any other affiliation. So it might be that you are applying under an organization that you are not necessarily a full-time um, staff member of, but maybe you're a board member with that entity. It should be the case um, that you are a rightful user of that account, if that makes sense. So even if you're one person representing that entity as the applicant, others in the entity would need to be involved and will ultimately sign the agreement to receive funds. So affiliation, email address, phone number. And then in this box, we're going to ask you to name the known members of the team at the point that you're applying. And again, we want to make sure there's at least two members of the team identified by the time this is submitted. Um, oh, I I just realized I made a mistake in here. That should say a total of four, not a total of three. I'm gonna go change that in just a minute. Um, so four is a full team, and that, of course, is about the fact that when we gather in person, et cetera, we're only going to have a limited fund to be able to bring everybody together. That does not mean that the entirety of your project is being carried out by only four people. Think of that as the leadership team, project lead, and three other members who are guiding the design. So there might be multiple other teaching artists, for instance, who are involved in actually leading the workshops. They don't need to be considered a part of the team necessarily, but we're hopeful that at least one teaching artist will be involved as a lead team member. Um, in this next box, we're going to ask you to identify the experience that the team members have. Um, so that could be anything from I've been doing a lot of reading on this topic to I attended the virtual mini conference that MAC held in December of 2026. I am a recent participant in Lifetime Arts workshop series, whatever the case might be, just in a small number of words. Um, and then, and by the way, these character amounts do not at all mean that you need to use 1,000 characters. Um, uh, and then the last thing that we ask for is an interest statement. What led you to um, this work in the first place? Why are you interested in creative aging work, but also why are you interested in this particular project? And when I say you, I mean all members of the team. So hopefully you can fashion kind of a vision statement for your team that encompasses those things. And we allowed 2,000 characters on this box, but again, no pressure to use that much space for sure. And then all it is after that is um, another section which asks you to attest to the assurances. So um, I'm sure you can see them, but I'll just go ahead and read the 5 items here. This application does not guarantee participation in the Artful Life project. It is your letter of interest in a way. Um, the Zoom interviews will take place following submission of this form as a second step to identifying participants. Priorities will be made based on readiness to participate, and that doesn't mean, again, prior knowledge so much. It can mean just sort of like your enthusiasm, that the timeline works for your team, etc. And um, um, being able to, I guess, articulate the community need, such as, and this is just one. This is by all means, not the one and only. But let's say you're saying there is nothing for our seniors in our community. Not arts, really not much of anything. Like we would want, obviously, to know that from the get-go so that as we are making our determination, we're making sure to spread these programs far and wide across the state in a way that really addresses need overall in Montana. Um, the next statement says all teams selected for the project are expected to participate in cohort activities as explained in the overview section of this form. Part two, during the interview process will be that we will be asking team members if they have any no-go dates. Maybe you have a family wedding in October or something. We will do our very, very best to make sure that the dates work for the selected teams at times and days of the week that work for those teams, which is why we're not spelling the schedule out in that great of detail right now. Um, um, And then, life happens. So those sessions will be recorded as a backup plan only if someone should have to miss it. Obviously, um, or I hope it's obvious, the one of the greatest parts about this project is the ability to come together to share our work, bounce ideas off of each other, learn from what other organizations are doing. And that's nearly impossible to get from a recording alone. So being present for the conversations, and maybe those will happen in breakouts a lot of the time, so they won't appear on the recording. So again, attendance that way is merely a backup plan to maybe fill in one member of the team if they should have to miss. Um, and then the grant funds, once again, will be up to $10,000 depending on um, the um, number of teams that we select to participate in the project. And those funds will not be awarded until 2027 once each team submits their plan for programming. And there's so many variables, in terms of, um, you know, the offerings that that team will ultimately carry out. Some of those variables, for instance, might be length of time. As a best practice in creative aging, what we say is that um, 6 to 8 weeks is kind of the ideal time. It's enough time. And that would be like a 1 day per week kind of session. There are some other best practices in creative aging work, such as consistency of time. So, meeting every Wednesday from 10 to noon, for instance, would be a typical design for creative aging work. And then again, sometimes there are reasons why maybe a week has to be skipped, but the ideal is 6 to 8 consecutive weeks so that knowledge and skill building is happening in fairly quick succession, and so that the participants can have a little bit of a practice um, developed at home in between those sessions. So they're bringing, their work to the group maybe next time. I'm just thinking of like a visual arts um, experience where that might come into play. But some organizations lean more heavily to a 6 week versus 8 week program. So obviously that's going to be a consideration that affects the funds that are needed for that particular workshop. Another factor might be that that a teaching artist is traveling from a little bit of a distance and needs to be paid mileage. Again, we're hopeful that we can construct teams where um, the primary members of the team are in that organization. That does not mean that it wouldn't be necessary to bring, let's say, a teaching artist from an hour away. That happens often in our state. That's going to influence the budget for that program. And then there might be some other cost factors like supplies. So depending on all of those factors, um, it might be that a team has a series of just 3 workshops that are longer, that maybe involve bringing in an artist from elsewhere, or have kind of heavy duty supply needs. Whereas another team might be able to stretch that up to $10,000 to be able to do 4 or even 5 workshops over the roughly 9-month period. Um, if their costs happen to be low. For instance, the teaching artist is relatively local, it doesn't take a lot of supplies, and that kind of thing. But we know from our experience doing seed programs in our state already that $2,000 approximately is kind of the sweet spot for being able to pay a teaching artist appropriately. And that ranges from 75 to 100 per hour, and maybe some planning time on top of that. And that just addresses the nature of freelancing as a teaching artist. If you're keeping a good portion of your day open to lead an hour and a half or to 2-hour workshop, you're certainly not going to be able to be employed elsewhere. So um, I just mentioned that because, sometimes those funds can be used up quicker than one may think. And yet, the $2,000 does stretch further than you might expect. So, um, and in some cases, it might take 2,500. And if we are awarding, let's say we do involve 8 teams in the project, then the award might be more like 7,500, and that would be 3 projects at $2,500 per project, which again, we know from experience is very doable um, in most every community. So I hope that front-loaded you with some idea of what this process is all about, but I bet you have some questions by now. So please unmute, put your question in the chat, or raise your hand. Suzanne, did you have something?
I did. First thing I wanted to ask is if
Yeah.
there's a matching requirement for the grant.
That is such a good question, and there is not.
Oh my goodness.
I know. However, you know, if you are in the fortunate position of involving um, an entity as a part of your team, you are allowed to use available funds to your advantage to enact programs. We certainly don't want to stand in the way of that. But I'm so glad that you asked that question because I had meant to mention that this is a non-matching grant. The match comes from your participation in the learning sessions and the planning. And there is one other, um, not a requirement, but I guess what I would say is something that we're hopeful of in growing this work across the state is that when this experience is all said and done, we think it would be really, really great if the teams that carried out programs in their communities would be willing to be a consultant or a resource for another community wanting to do the same down the road. They may pay, a member or two of your team to be a guest speaker. They may not be able to do that, but it's a way of sort of sharing the wealth and spreading the work across the state. So we're just trying to create this web across the state. And to make these programs, first and foremost, available to older adult learners. In some cases, that's the term, it might be 55 and up. In some, it's 65 and up.
Sorry.
Lately, I've been using over 60 because a lot of the data points that we look that we find, come across our desk, um, kind of use that terminology. So I've just kind of said that lately. If somebody is 58 and wants to participate and you're saying over 60, please let them. you know, but that's I guess the ideal outcome of this overall 2-year project is that we would be able to name your community-led team um, as, a resident expert um, in carrying out this work and what do's and don'ts you might be able to recommend to others. And obviously, we're going to catalog, um, responses from all the participants that we're going to be sharing out at the end of this project. But really nothing replaces a human face, just, talking to another group of folks in the state who are really interested in getting started and they kind of don't know where to begin. Um, Again, our hope is that we will be creating um, a team of experts. Um, what other questions do you have?
So how many people would be in a class normally? What would be an expected number?
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. I did skim over some of the best practices. We normally say 10 to 12 um, for ideal. Wouldn't it be great if all of our K-12 classrooms were 10 to 12 students instead of 30 plus in some cases? So yeah, that is an ideal, just educationally in general, but particularly for this age group. And a lot of that has to do with um, uh, sort of the optimal community building. If it's less than that, some of those community building elements may not really occur in the way that we'd like to see them happen. And if it's more than that, then it's a matter of the teaching artist really not being able to give that participant some good attention. Um, Other questions and or comments? I would just love to hear from all of you what you're thinking about this, what ideas are popping into your mind already about how you might approach this work, even specific classes that you'd like to see um, take shape in your communities. Don't be
What do you
shy.
expect to what are you hoping to when a class is put on? Does
Mhm.
the artwork that's created go to some kind of a event? Do we, I mean, is there a
That
goal
is
for
an,
the artwork produced or?
yeah. One element of most creative aging projects is that there is a culminating event. So if it's a music related workshop, there might be a concert at the end. If it's a visual arts workshop, there is usually an art opening um, that a traditional gallery style opening that to show the work where participants can um, invite their friends and family, but also the general public can see the level of work being produced by adults who just happen to be over 60 or so. Yes, Jeannie.
There, sorry, I was muted. I want to say that in the light of that question, there's a play called The Pittman Painters. And right at this
Mm,
moment, I can't remember the author's name, but it's very
mm,
much worth looking up. It's inspiring it's a true story about a group of painters who had a class. They work in the mines, and they had
mhm,
an art enrichment. They had an enrichment class,
mhm,
educational,
mhm,
that they paid
mhm.
for in their community. And they got this art
Right.
teacher and the inspirational things that actually happened, and it shows their paintings, and they actually had huge success, and they're such unlikely and very interesting people. So for Lynn's, your question and your thoughts, which I so appreciate, I encourage everybody to look at it because it's completely inspirational.
Thank you so much. I'm not familiar with that one.
I had never
Um,
heard of it, but it's fabulous.
Lee Hall
yeah.
was the author.
Who?
Lee, Lee
That's
Hall.
right. That's right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Who
Sorry.
said that?
On the culminating,
Oh, that's okay.
oh, was that
Oh,
you, Lynn? I think it was Lynn.
okay. That's
Um, on the culminating event side of things, one example that comes to mind for me is that there was a writing class that took place in Glasgow a couple of years ago, and um, it was a smaller, kind of smaller than optimal, I think, maybe seven writers, and it was somewhat centered on memoir writing or at least essays that might be memoir-ish in nature. And that group um, held a reading in the town park in the gazebo, which they themselves refreshed the paint on in preparation for their culminating event. And they were so surprised. They'd put it in the newspaper or on the radio talk show or something. And I think they had like 35 or so people attend to hear the reading, and they were definitely not all friends and family. They were just people in the community who were interested, and they felt celebrated, so inspired to go on that they ended up just working with that teaching artist to say, can we just pay you to keep us going as a group? Which is a really cool outcome. I would say that the culminating activities take many, many shapes. You know, if it were shy poets, it might be a printed anthology that goes out, not a public reading, you know. I mean, there some culmination, though, is a really a key element of the work. And I was so anxious to get into laying out the project for you that I did kind of skim over some of those best practices. But I have lots of resources that I can share if you haven't attended any of our prior workshops to try to help you get up to speed.
I think one of the funnest things that I have heard of for older people is theater, but you don't move, you just speak. So they're sitting in a
Oh,
circle and they're doing theater because a lot of their bodies won't work, but they
mhm,
can
mhm,
do like different voices and be different characters just sitting in their chair. And that's a lot of fun and just way different than like visual art or, what's
yeah.
usually offered. So a bit of theater, I
Mhm.
think would be great.
Oh, yeah. That's such a cool idea, and I'm glad that you made that point about sort of script reading, really, versus movement on a theater stage, because another key element that really happens in designing these programs is that the teacher is having to fit the learning to the specific needs to the learners, just like any age group, honestly. And so in some cases, depending on the population, if they're not necessarily able to move, or at least not able to move swiftly, then like that is such a great example of another way to approach it. So these take shape, in response to the community needs, but also the needs of the individual learners in the class.
Oh, so are you going to basically try to get like a variety of different kinds of arts for each team? Like one team for visual, one team for music, one team for literary, etc.
Not necessarily. I actually could see teams being built where that team does the variety making. In other words, they design a slate of programs that touches on some different disciplines. So I kind of think it's going to come out in the wash, to be honest. Once we identify the teams, if they're not so evidently, um, I guess, tied to a particular discipline, I think in the design process in the fall, that variety will take shape in the design process. And, as I said, a big benefit of this cohort model is going to be getting together, bouncing ideas off of one another, um, sharing things we've come across, just as what you all demonstrated just now. And then, taking that slow time over a few months to develop the ideas for the slate of programs. But every team will develop at least three offerings. And as I mentioned, maybe in a couple of cases, it might be possible to even do five. Through that process, I'm confident we're going to end up with some variety without having to intentionally, um, you know, pick a team for each. Our time is up, but I certainly don't want to leave you with unanswered questions. So if you need to hop off, feel free to do that. We will understand, but if you have other questions that you would like answered, I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes and answer those. I think I am going to go ahead and stop the recording now. That's okay. And I do want to thank everybody for jumping on. I mean, just the fact that um, really so many of you, it might not seem like a lot, but believe me, we do this kind of thing a lot, and sometimes it's fewer than five people that can be in one place at one time. So I'm super appreciative and really excited to work with all of you as you move, hopefully, toward the application. So I'm stopping the recording, but please stay on if you would like um, other questions answered. And thanks, everyone.